could be a series of different men, it could be a series of different descriptions of the same man, but if you put together everything that we know about what the witnesses have got to say, then you can come up with a composite picture.
John makes the decision to follow the same procedure as would be used in a modern-day murder hunt. He's going to collate all the descriptions given by witnesses. If the police in 1888 had had the image of a suspect to work with, would they have caught him before he killed again? Catherine Eddowes spent until 1 a.m. on the morning of the 30th safely locked up in Bishopsgate Station. Eventually, the duty officer judged her sober enough to be released, and she set out, back towards Aldgate.
The sad thing is, and I dare say they did notice it, that they'd released her at a time and place when the hunter was out looking for his next victim.
He had already found Liz Stride. Her body lay in Berner Street. When it was discovered at 12:45, it was still warm. The cut to the throat which killed still bleeding. She had died less than 5 minutes before. Beyond this single wound, there was nothing else. No mutilation.
The discoverers have actually disturbed the murderer. They've turned into the yard and disturbed the murderer at his work.
The people who disturbed the Ripper weren't quick enough to save Liz Stride's life. They may have unwittingly sealed Catherine Eddowes' fate.
The offender feels they have to complete, they have to satiate some particular need. He's probably pumped up with adrenaline, on the hunt and on the prowl for the next person to make damn sure this time he's going to get that opportunity and he's going to see the offence through, complete it.
We know that the Ripper was in Berner Street around 1 a.m. and we know that he went west to Mitre Square. He can have arrived there no later than 1:30, because when the body of Catherine Eddowes was found at 1:45, it was obvious he had spent some time with it. Catherine Eddowes suffered worse degradation than any of the previous victims.
It could be through anger of the first bungled attempt. Ultimately, he only knows what was his state of mind at that time. Perhaps she has been non-compliant, so he's done something more personal to her in terms of slashing her face, cutting off her nose.
It's possible to place the Ripper in a third location that night. At 2:55, PC Alfred Long was conducting a search in Goulston Street. His eye was drawn to some graffiti, and directly beneath it, a piece of blooded cloth. It had been cut from an apron that Eddowes was wearing.
It's probably known for absolute certain that the murderer took from one scene and put somewhere else.
What's most important about this is the when and the where. In Berner Street, he'd been interrupted. He started hunting again and found Catherine Eddowes in Mitre Square. The find in Goulston Street says that he then changed direction. His work was done, the night was over, so where was he heading? Making his way home. How close to where he lived did he commit his crimes? 1 week later, a letter arrived with Mr. George Lusk. He was chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, a group of local men who patrolled the streets trying to catch the Ripper. The letter was headed from hell. It came with half a human kidney.
Mr. Lusk, sir, I sent you half a kidney I took from one woman and preserved it for you. T'other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out, if you only wait a while longer. Signed, catch me when you can, Mr. Lusk.
The newspapers and police received hundreds of hoax messages claiming to be from the killer. But none of them have the credibility that this letter carries.
This was a kidney which showed signs of Bright's disease, which was a disease of the kidney that Catherine Eddowes was said to have suffered from. the length of renal artery on the kidney corresponded with the length remaining in Catherine Eddowes' body. Now, if all of these accounts were true, then this clearly gives a lot more credibility to the Lusk letter.
What does the letter reveal about its author? Some people say it's a trick, that the Ripper wrote it as an educated person trying to put people off the scent by appearing semi-literate. Laura turns to forensic linguist Dr. Frances Rock. She specializes in the analysis of this kind of text.
What does it possibly tell us about the offender?
There are words that are interesting, like two words that have E's, as we might see to the modern eye, missing from the end: knife and while. They look like mistakes to us now, but at the time, maybe this author wasn't aware that this was wrong. We can't use this letter to identify one definite author. But we can make all sorts of observations which may help us to think about who the killer might have been. It's unlikely that the writer of this letter will have necessarily had a full education.
This letter offers few revelations. But conspiracy theories aside, the obvious explanation is the likely one. The author was poorly educated. That puts him in the lower classes. For Laura, the letter offers two other clues: the reference to cannibalism and the fact that George Lusk was its recipient.
I've dealt with only 2 cases in 10 years where there's been cannibalism, where an organ's been taken with the intent of actually frying it and then eating it. Perhaps that's something that he wants people to believe, that that's what he's done, to instill more terror, you know, and create that real impact on the local community.
Unlike those letters, which were definitely hoaxes, this one didn't go to the government or the press. Jack didn't seek to have a national or global impact. He sent it to a local community leader. His attention was focused not on the wider world, but on Whitechapel. All the evidence is pointing one way, towards the idea that the Ripper was a local man. On the morning of the 9th of November, 1888, Thomas Bowyer went to Miller's Court in Whitechapel to collect rent from one of his tenants. When he received no answer, he peered through the window. He later told the press that what he'd seen was the work of the devil. The door to Mary Kelly's lodgings was locked. Pieces of her lay around the room. We know less about this 5th victim than any of the others. She was younger than them, around 25. She was said to be pretty, although no photograph of her in life exists. She, too, was a prostitute, but she was the only one of the Ripper's victims to have a permanent address. She was the only one to be killed inside. What he did to her was perhaps the most extreme violence that it's possible to inflict on a human body.
The face is gashed beyond all recognition. The nose, cheeks, eyebrows and ears being partially removed.
He may have spent hours with the body.
Perhaps it's just that he's comfortable in the area, you know, that he's operating, and he's managed to control her quite quickly, and then he can do whatever are the things that he wants to do, derived from his own fantasy base.
Both breasts have been removed by more or less circular incisions. The heart is absent.
Most Ripper experts say that this was the last murder, that after Mary Kelly, and for reasons that have never been explained, Jack stopped. Laura has now studied all 5 killings. All the elements she needs are coming together. The DNA tests, the geo-profiling, the computer-generated image of the Ripper's face. With all this information, how close can she come to unmasking him? Laura Richards of New Scotland Yard's Violent Crime Directorate has examined all 5